welcome to this online session. Today we will be talking about malnutrition and health. This is part of the certificate program in food and nutrition, course 2, your food and its utilization, block 2, unit 6. I am your program coordinator, Professor Deeksha Kapoor from the discipline of Nutritional Sciences, Indira Gandhi National Open University. So, learners, do you recall the last time you felt tired or experienced lethargy? You may not have been able to concentrate on the work on hand, or some other time you may have suffered from, say, soreness in your mouth, an ulcer in the mouth, or your lips may have been raw, cracked at the edges. Well, have you thought that these may be due to poor diet, or your diet may have been lacking in few essential nutrients? Well, you would notice that people suffer from health problems linked to poor nutrition or faulty eating habits. They may be eating enough food, so it may appear. However, the diet may be lacking in a particular food group or a nutrient which may be leading to deficiency. Malnutrition is a major concern. Eating a faulty diet may lead to our body functions being severely affected. Even small extent of malnutrition can affect our health and our efficiency at work. Therefore, today let us understand the concept of malnutrition and health. We will identify the consequences of consuming faulty diets. We will look at the common nutrient deficiencies disorders affecting population groups in our country. We will look at the preventive and remedial measures for these nutrient deficiencies disorders, and also understand what is obesity and look at some remedial measures. So let us begin by first understanding what is malnutrition. By now you must be clear that malnutrition is an impairment of health which results from deficiency, excess or imbalance of nutrients. So an inadequate intake of food can lead to undernutrition, whereas when a person eats in excess of the body needs, the individual may be malnourished in terms of overnutrition, being overweight or obese. So it is clear that malnutrition includes both overnutrition and undernutrition. Generally, we tend to link malnutrition only with undernutrition or lack of food. On the contrary, eating more than the body requires is also malnutrition. Therefore, undernutrition, you have deficiency of proteins, calories, or you can have deficiency of micronutrients in the body like the vitamins and minerals, and can lead to undernutrition. So both overnutrition and undernutrition are manifestations of malnutrition. So with this understanding, let us look at how does undernutrition affect our health. Well, by now it must be clear to you that if you do not eat the right kind of food in the right amount, particularly if you eat or your diet lacks in the essential nutrients, it can affect the growth, and particularly the early years of life, childhood, is a very critical period from the point of growth and development. So an inadequate diet will lead to the growth being faltered. The child will be underweight. The height will be affected. So the child will be small statured, stunted, or if the weight for the height is low, the child will be wasted. Therefore, growth faltering is an important aspect of undernutrition. You also know that the brain development is maximum during the first 6 months. So any inadequacy in the diet will affect the brain development. In addition, deficiency of minerals like calcium will affect the bones of the child. So the bones will not harden, new bones will not form. So just to help you understand, look at the effect of undernutrition on wrist bones. What you see is an X-ray of a child who is undernourished at 7 years of age on the left, and a healthy wrist X-ray of a child. And as you can see, the new bones, in case of undernourishment or inadequate diet, there may be only 4 bones as compared to the 7 bones in an healthy individual. So all these aspects need to be considered when we are talking about undernutrition. Besides the physical growth, you have the intellectual capacity of the individual also being affected. As the brain development is affected, the individual, particularly the child, may have lack of concentration, intellectual performance, emotional performance will be affected. And if this child grows to be an adult under the same circumstances, will grow up to be less productive, will have poor work capacity. Therefore, undernutrition also impacts on intellectual capacity and work performance. Further, it impacts on the resistance to infection. It is hampered. How? An inadequate dietary intake will lead to weight loss. As you have seen in case of children, growth faltering, the growth will be slow, there will be weight loss, and this will impact on the immunity. There will be less immunity, and such a child will be prone to more infections like diarrhea, worm infestations, and this will lead to low absorption of nutrients from the intestine, loss of appetite, which will further aggravate the nutrition of the child, inadequate dietary intake, and therefore this sets in a vicious cycle of inadequate diet leading to infections because of low immunity, leading to malabsorption, loss of appetite, malnutrition, and this vicious cycle continues. Therefore, undernutrition greatly impacts on the health. What about overnutrition and obesity? As you have already seen that overnutrition is both overweight and obesity. So when you consume more energy, more food than you need, the body stores that extra energy as fat. Well, you may be wondering then, how much fat is too fat or obese? Well, we have a simple measure, what we call as the body mass index, BMI. It is the measure which is used to detect malnutrition. In fact, both overnutrition as well as undernutrition. And what is BMI? It is the ratio of the weight in kg to the square of the height in meters. Simple. So let's take a quick break. I would like you to quickly calculate the BMI, your BMI. If look at your weight. For example, if you weigh 50 kgs and your height is say 165 centimeters, convert it into meters, 1.65. So your weight 50 divided by 1.6 into 1.6 will help you calculate your BMI. So could you calculate your BMI? Okay. Now, what is the next step? What you need to do is to compare your BMI with the standard which has been given for the BMI. The World Health Organization presents the classification for adults which are used for categorizing them into different grades of malnutrition. So, if your BMI falls between 18.5 to 24.9, it is normal. This is the international classification. However, for the Indian population, we use the Asian cutoffs So, for me, if my BMI would fall between 18.5 to 22.9, I am maintaining a normal nutritional status. Below 18.5 is underweight, and more than 22.9, that is 23 to 24.9, I will be overweight, and more than 25, a BMI value more than 25 will be categorized as obese. And further, you can categorize them as class 1, class 2 obesity, class 3 depending on the BMI. Therefore, you've noticed BMI is a simple measure or classification of underweight, overweight, obesity in adults. What about children? Yes, in children, from 5 to 19 years, we use BMI for age. World Health Organization has given specific standards, so we can compare and accordingly categorize children into different grades of malnutrition. What about being fat? Should you be concerned about being fat? Well, it goes without saying that overweight, obesity, they are great risk factors for non-communicable diseases. What are non-communicable diseases? The so-called lifestyle diseases which we see today: diabetes, heart problems like hypertension, chronic respiratory diseases, cancer. These are all linked with overweight and obesity. The two are risk factors for these lifestyle diseases. Therefore, we need to be careful. So, the next question is, then how do we assess the malnutrition? How do we know whether I am healthy or not? Simple. There are simple methods to measure, like anthropometry, biochemical assessment, clinical examination, and dietary assessment. Each of this method is very useful to know whether I am maintaining good health or not. I am not going to go into details of these methods here in this presentation, as we have a different presentation only on assessing malnutrition using these methods for assessing nutritional status. So, let us move further, and our main focus today will be to look at the common nutritional deficiencies which we find in our population groups. You would be interested to know that today there are 4 major nutrient deficiency disorders affecting population groups in our country. Children, adolescent, women, particularly pregnant, lactating women, and women in the reproductive age, they may suffer from one or all of these deficiency disorders: protein energy malnutrition, vitamin A deficiency, anemia, and iodine deficiency disorders. What are these disorders? Let us look at them one by one. We begin with the protein energy malnutrition. As the name suggests, protein energy malnutrition is a range of pathological conditions which arise due to the deficiency of protein and energy, the two major macronutrients. If our diet is lacking in these major macronutrients, we suffer from protein energy malnutrition, and it is generally associated with infection. It is usually the children who are most affected with protein energy malnutrition. What are the clinical features? How do we know that the child is suffering from protein energy malnutrition? Well, marasmus, kwashiorkor, marasmic kwashiorkor, and the subclinical forms of PEM are common. You would notice it is the subclinical forms of protein energy malnutrition which you would see most commonly in community settings. Marasmus, kwashiorkor are the tip of the iceberg. Very frank symptoms, very rarely you will see. However, it is these subclinical forms, and how do we recognize them is what we will take one by one, starting with marasmus. Marasmus is usually or more frequently observed in children from 6 months of age to 2 years of age. This starts if a child is born with low birth weight and this child then is not breastfed and at 6 months not provided complementary foods, the child therefore is suffering from inadequacy in their diets, is starving, and this may lead to a condition called marasmus. It is characterized by very low body weight for age. There is loss of subcutaneous fat, that is the fat under the skin, and there is gross muscle wasting. So the child gives an appearance of being thin, wasted. And as we've just talked about, that the brain development is happening during the first few months of life, and if the right food is not given, inadequate diet is there, the brain development is impaired and may permanently affect the child's intellectual capacity. Now this child then grows up beyond 2 years and the diet continues to be lacking not only in calories but now also in proteins. Together it would lead to stunted growth. There was already low weight for the age, as we have already seen in marasmus, and this continues. The child may not look as emaciated or they may not be muscle wasting as seen in a marasmic child, because here there may be accumulation of fluids in the limb, on the face, and may give an appearance of being a puffed face or the body called edema. But there may be skin changes, patchy skin, there may be sores on the skin, there may be discoloration of the hair, which you will notice in the community, in those communities where children are not provided enough food. This child will be very inactive, weak, fretful, and will give a very appearance of being ill. So this is kwashiorkor. But as I've informed, you will not find very many children with these frank symptoms, but you would find children with the subclinical forms. You will see that children, their height and weight are considerably below that of healthy children. We have the standards by which we can compare. So if you take the weight and height of children who are suffering, you will find them to be of low weight for their age. Their height will be low than the height for that age. Their weight for their height will be low, and therefore they will be either underweight, they will be stunted, they will be wasted. And we have simple standards given by World Health Organization to categorize such children based on their height, weight. If it falls within the range, if it is below the -2 standard deviation, it is called moderate underweight, and -3 standard deviation, then the mean weight, the child is categorized as severely undernourished. Therefore, it is the subclinical forms of protein energy malnutrition we are concerned with today. Moving further, let us look at the vitamin A deficiency. Well, you have already learned about vitamin A as a very important fat soluble vitamin, and it is required for good vision. Therefore, if it is lacking in the diet, which is the case in our country, children, pregnant lactating women can suffer from vitamin A deficiency. In fact, it is a public health problem, and xerophthalmia is the disease condition. Rather, it refers to the eye manifestations, the signs that arise due to deficiency of vitamin A in the body. What are these signs? It is a range of signs. The deficiency of vitamin A, since vitamin A is required for good vision, it begins with the first symptom, which is night blindness. The individual will complain of not being able to see in dim light, and then as the condition deteriorates, the deficiency continues, the white portion of the eye, which is called conjunctiva, that becomes dry. It starts becoming discolored and it loses its brightness, which is called the conjunctival xerosis. Then you would see that dry, foamy, triangular spots may appear on the conjunctiva towards the temporal side, that is near the ear part. As you can see, foamy white spots, which are called Bitot spots. These are all clinical signs which you can see, and the condition deteriorates further and the cornea starts getting affected. It becomes sore, ulcers may develop, which may heal but may leave scars and will interfere with the normal vision, and ultimately it will lead to the destruction of the eye. The eye will completely melt and get destroyed, which is called keratomalacia. These are the signs, symptoms of vitamin A deficiency as we have just looked at it. So what can we do? Can it be treated? Well, usually a protocol is followed. Vitamin A supplement is provided depending on the age of the child. A less than 6 months, 50,000 international unit of vitamin A, the dose is provided to children depending on the regime which has been provided. 6 to 12 months, 1 lakh international unit. For children more, 1 year and more, 2 lakh international unit of vitamin A supplement is given. In most of our programs for children, these vitamin A supplementation is provided. What can we do to prevent this problem? Since prevention is always better than cure, there are very many preventive measures. The first and the foremost is to promote the consumption of vitamin A rich foods. We know that vitamin A is available in 2 forms, retinol and beta carotene. So encourage the consumption of beta carotene foods among children, pregnant, lactating mothers. And what are these food sources? Green leafy vegetables are rich sources of vitamin A. Just 40 grams meet the requirement. You learned that yellow, orange color fruits and vegetables like mango, papaya, carrot, pumpkins are rich sources of beta carotene. Include them in the diet. For retinol, milk and milk products will give you enough retinol to meet the vitamin A needs. Then breastfeeding is a very good practice to protect against vitamin A deficiency. Growing of vitamin A rich foods in your home, in the kitchen gardens, can promote the consumption and use of vitamin A rich foods. And of course, awareness, nutrition education to promote the consumption and production of vitamin A rich foods will go a long way in improving the vitamin A deficiency situation we find ourselves with. Next, let us look at nutritional anemia. Nutritional anemia again refers to a condition in which the hemoglobin content of the blood is lower than the normal. We know that hemoglobin is the pigment which is present in the blood, and when our diet lack in one or more essential nutrient, usually iron, but also folate or vitamin B12, then it results in the hemoglobin content being lower and leading to the deficiency condition called nutritional anemia. Usually anemia of iron deficiency anemia is very common among the population groups, and it leads to the lack of hemoglobin. Heme is the iron and globin is the protein. So if iron is not included in the diet, the hemoglobin is not formed. What does hemoglobin do? It carries oxygen to the blood, carries oxygen via the blood to the various tissues. Therefore, if you have lower hemoglobin, there will be lower capacity to do physical work, the individual will be tired, lethargic. Among pregnant women, low birth weight is the direct consequence. A mother who is anemic will give birth to a low birth weight baby, and also maternal mortality, her risk for mortality increases. Therefore, we need to be very careful. What are the causes? Well, there are very many causes, but the most important is low intake of iron-rich food in the diet. It is required in small amount, yet we are not aware about what food items to include so as to meet the needs. In addition, we know that during periods of growth, like early childhood, pregnancy, when the fetus has to grow, the requirement increases, and if we do not increase the iron intake, it can lead to anemia. It will lead to low stores of iron in the body. Then for adolescent girls and women in the reproductive age group, there are menstrual losses which may add to the loss of iron or anemia in these conditions. Hookworm infestation is one reason of blood loss, and inadequate iron absorption, particularly diets which are rich in food of plant origin. They have certain substances which hinder the absorption of iron from the diet. So there can be many causes of lack of iron in the diet or leading to anemia. You must consider these aspects. So how can we prevent it? Well, dietary measures. Since the problem is of dietary origin, we need to provide enough iron-rich food. So consumption of iron-rich foods, green leafy vegetables, other vegetables, nuts, oil seeds, meat and meat products are rich sources, but consumption of those foods which enhance the absorption of iron will go a long way in improving the iron status. So consuming vitamin C rich foods, citrus fruits like lemon, lime, oranges along with meals will help absorption of iron in our diet. Supplementation with iron and folic acid. In most of our programs, welfare programs for children, adolescent, pregnant, lactating mothers, iron supplementation, iron folic acid is given. Iron 100 milligrams, folic acid 500 micrograms is given to all pregnant lactating mothers every day, whereas for adolescent girls, weekly supplementation is given. For children under 1 to 5 years of age, 1 syrup containing 1 ml of syrup containing 20 milligrams iron folic acid 100 micrograms will help prevent anemia. Let us look at the last, the iodine deficiency disorder. This too is a spectrum of disabling conditions which affect the health of mankind, this deficiency starts early in fetal life and can continue through adulthood due to inadequate dietary intake of iodine. Iodine is a trace element. Trace element meaning it is required in very small amount, yet we do not meet the need through our diet. Why? Because this nutrient is deficient in the environment. The food, water, soil has reduced amount of iodine in general. So the food which is deficient or grown in such soil which is deficient in iodine will result in poor iodine content, and when we consume this food we do not get the iodine. Therefore, in addition to this, you have certain goitrogens present in food, substances which can interfere with the iodine intake of the iodine present in the food. You may be wondering, why do we need iodine in the first place? Well, you know by now that it is required for the production of the hormone thyroxine, which is produced by the thyroid gland. And this thyroxine hormone is required for normal human development and health. And therefore, a lack of iodine in the diet can lead to iodine deficiency disorders. In adults, the first or the most obvious deficiency sign is the enlargement of the thyroid gland, which we call as goiter. You may have noticed the gland being swelled. However, it is among the children which is most, the adverse effects are very critical, and a child who is deficient in iodine, for example, a mother who is pregnant and has iodine deficiency will give birth to a child who is cretin. Such child will have poor brain development, irreversible brain damage, and if this continues, mental retardation, growth failure, speech hearing defect, such a child is called cretin. Therefore, iodine deficiency disorder is a grave deficiency disorder, and we can prevent it by using fortified salt. Iodine fortified with, or salt fortified with iodine will go a long way in improving the iodine status. Use iodine rich foods, particularly food grown in the coastal region. There the soil is rich in iodine, so the fish, shellfish, vegetables grown in those areas will give enough iodine. So we end our discussion here. We hope you got a good idea about the nutrient deficiency disorders. Thank you.